Hi everyone. Here's our weekly update for EED 345, Methods of PE and Health in the Elementary Classroom. So again, this will be a question week or a discussion forum week for assignments. As you can see here, going through these are our assignments kind of as we move forward. So the question, and I'm also going to touch on a few things in chapter 2 here in this short little video. So looking at the discussion questions here, or the discussion question for this week. Last week you had to choose between a question. This week I just give you one question to answer. Okay, so you're on a planning committee, policies, programs, looking at increasing the physical activity, the movement in your school. Okay, and so somebody in your group talks about doing a 2-mile mini marathon for the kids, and then talking about how it's a great way to get physical activity off to a strong start. Everybody loves marathons, so on and so forth, that type of thing. So do you support that? Do you not support that? And then what information could you share, not share, with your committee in support or in opposition of the proposal? Okay, so what does that look like? Okay, so not just your opinion, but what information from the book or from research or whatever you might be looking at could you use to either support it or to not support it, and maybe bring up a different idea in terms of kicking off the school year and addressing the need for physical activity in your school, which correlates and connects to the second chapter of the book or of the notes here, PowerPoints, if you're looking at that. So as a teacher, both a physical education teacher, but also as a classroom teacher, we need to know and understand what kids or what children's needs are in terms of physical activity and what their readiness level is in terms of physical activity. Okay, this also goes for academic content and cognitive content as well, not just the physical activity component of it. We need to understand the needs and the readiness, which for academic content is why we do things, such as MAPS testing or different assessments to see where the children are at in terms of whether it's reading, math, whatever it might be. Okay, so same thing here with physical activity, right? So if we talk about a couple things here, need. Okay, a need is a drive to do or accomplish something. Okay, so needs are influenced by our genetic makeup a little bit, the environment we're in, whether it's home environment, school environment, etc., social contacts, parents, peers, teachers, different people that we come in contact with, right? So the need, okay, a need is a drive to do something, okay? I don't need to get 100% or an A in all my classes, but it's something that I really strive to want to do. Okay, and so that's a need, okay, for example. Okay, so some things that kids have a need for. Okay, need for movement. We may not think that we do, but we do have that drive to move. Okay, to get around, to whatever that movement might be. Approval, success, peer acceptance, tolerance, cooperation, compete. So there's some different needs that most children have. Okay, there are some extremes one way or another, right? So some needs, some students don't have a need for some of these things. Some have an overabundance of need for some of these things. Okay, so again, something that we just have to try to understand for our kids. Okay, a few other things to think of in terms of physical movement or activity. Okay. Need for physical competency. So if talking about students who believe they are capable will participate more fully. So it's like with any academic content as well. If you are comfortable or feel competent about something, you will more than likely participate in it or work at it or be involved with it. Okay. Especially for physical movement or physical activity. A lot of times children if they don't feel comfortable, they don't want to be embarrassed about doing something, and so they may not try. The old stories about pull-ups or different things where, kids may not be able to do something and kind of not wanting to do it then. Okay. I think of pull-ups as one thing is that, remember when I was doing maybe in elementary school, pull-ups are a very difficult exercise, right? And so for some kids who are bigger, they might be stronger than other kids, but they might be bigger. So it's harder to pull that weight up than it is for somebody who is smaller. Okay? So it's not necessarily a real reflection on physical competency when there's other ways to do those things. Anyway, adventure and novelty, creation or creativity, rhythm, the need to understand and know things. Again, all things that are important in terms of the understanding or the needs of kids. Okay. So children, as we have talked about before in many other classes, age and maturity or mature specific attributes influence how kids learn. So some kids can do things differently at different ages, right? And so when we talk about, having things on, what's the term I'm looking for? When kids can do or are supposed to be able to do things by a certain age, a certain skill, or understand a certain concept. Okay, again, it depends on maturity of the child. Okay, and so it doesn't always happen the same for everybody. Just remember that in terms of development. Okay, take a look at the table 2.1 in regards to this. I'm not sure if the pages are still exactly this in the book, but take a look at that as you're going through information in the book and skimming and reading the book. We can go down to the next one. Here we go. Again, so genetic makeup can make a difference in terms of growth patterns, development patterns, but nutrition and lack of activity can also affect growth and development. Okay, and so as a teacher, we want to try to combat that as much as we can. We can't combat what's necessarily happening maybe at home or in other environments that the child is at, but we can promote movement. Okay, I'm not necessarily saying that as a teacher we have to promote sports and being involved with that, but movement, lifestyle activities. Okay, it doesn't have to be just about sports. Okay, so we can also provide or promote like healthy snacking stuff too, and keep some healthy snacks maybe in our classroom. Okay. Again, just some general characteristics here of kids, but kids grow quickly from birth to age 5. We slow down a little bit then after age 6, but then of course we hit growth spurts, most of us in that adolescent or puberty time period. Okay, girls are earlier than boys with that. Okay, so elementary school, a good time to learn certain motor skills and a variety of motor skills to try to develop those as early as possible. Okay, so we talked about growth patterns here a little bit already, and also for growth, height and weight. Girls typically reach their adolescent growth spurts before boys. Again, it says typical, but it's not everybody. Okay, so 5th or 6th grade, then boys kind of sometimes by age 14 or more will surpass or catch up in their growth spurt. And some are earlier, and some are later. There are some people who don't hit their growth spurts and stuff till after 19 or 20 sometimes. So strength and endurance is another component in terms of an important characteristic for kids. Strength or power in relation to body size, muscular strength increases with age, and there are strength differences among kids. So if we're doing an activity, how can we modify activities to keep students who are overweight or not excited or want to participate in physical activity engaged, right? So if I go back to that example of pull-ups, okay, if you have a bigger kid who might be just as strong as somebody who is smaller, but has to do more work to do a pull-up, that is not necessarily effective. So what's something different that a child or we can do with kids that can demonstrate that strength? Okay, so we need to think of alternatives sometimes to activities. Okay. Again, we talked about maturation of the kids and how they will be matured at different ages, different levels based upon genetics, environment, and influence. Okay, something I think that is important to remember: aerobic activity. So aerobic activity is just movement, sustained movement, where kids or anybody has adequate oxygen to meet the demands of the activity. Okay, so thinking of doing something that increases like a child's heart rate, okay, or their breathing rate a little bit. That's that aerobic activity component, okay, and that's just about anything that you can think of in terms of an activity. Not everything, but a lot of things to do that. Okay, so adults prefer to exercise usually as quickly as possible, right? We like, if we're going to exercise, we want to do it, get it done, and get it over with. Okay, children prefer typically the low intensity, high activity or high volume activities. Okay, so doing things like I don't know, playing kickball. Or playing a game of tag, or different things like that, where younger children like to do those types of things as compared to adults. Okay, where we might like high intensity, shorter duration. Okay, so we want to try to do a variety of activities or provide varied opportunities for our kids to engage in activities and do some fun stuff. So like out at recess, maybe we will introduce some multiple games for our kids if we're supervising recess, rather than having them play the same ones all the time and allowing them to pick those as well. Okay, talks a little bit about distance running in the book. Distance running is okay. Now this might have a little connection to that question. So to think about if it's something like it talks here about continued distance running. Can create some issues. Okay, so to think about how if you wanted to incorporate some longer running, how you would modify that, how you would do that with their younger kids. Okay, schools a lot of times use this pacer test still. I know some of my kids in their PE class will still do that even up into middle school, to where it's not a 1 mile run type thing like it used to be probably when I was in school, to do like these academic fitness tests. I don't really know if they do academic fitness tests anymore, but the pacer test is to see, you have to kind of just go a certain speed and to keep that speed up for as long as you can. So it's not actually running a mile. It might be, if you got 20 laps in, that, which is fine, fine. And then you compare that to how you did the last time you did it. So it's getting better. Heat stress. So if you're out for recess, you're doing things where you're outside and it's very, very warm. Just be aware to be careful, with activities, and that we're not putting kids in jeopardy of getting heat stroke. So we have to be careful with that. Okay. A couple other things here to mention in terms of skill development and how skills develop. So development starts from the head down to the foot, okay? And then it also goes from inside out, okay? So head to foot for development, okay, meaning it's easier for me to control, for example, the movement of my head as a very young child than it is to control the development of my foot, okay? And also easier for control my hands than it is my foot, okay? And then also inside out, okay? So it's easier for me to move my shoulder, okay, as I develop than it is for me to, develop my fine motor skills in my fingers. Okay. And so head to foot, okay, inside to out, and then also large movements before the fine movements. Okay. So throwing a football or throwing a ball might be easier, than, catching a ball or something like that. Okay. So the large movements are learned before the fine motor or the small movements. Okay. And so again, skill development also looks at introductory, intermediate, mastery. So short breaks, you work through those, pretty quickly. So you introduce the skill, you give them time to work on it and have feedback. And then hopefully they have time and then you give them time to master that skill, perform it, do it in a game or an activity. Okay. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. But make sure you go to the discussion post to answer this by Sunday, and I'll give you some feedback. Take care and see you soon.